All right, so basically, I wanted to just quickly kind of recap what MDS is all about. I'm sure you've heard plenty from Adam, and if you've spoken with other team members, essentially what MyDigitalShield is aiming for and the experience we're trying to bring to people is essentially give them an easy-to-use, easy way to deliver a clean internet experience. And that is what we're all about. There's a couple of different solutions that we have. But it all really pretty much revolves around our data center's ability to provide a UTM to your customers and our partners via the cloud. Typically, you think of a UTM device as an on-premise device that will provide different protection services. Literally, the point of protection is that customers egress their perimeter, which is typically per site. And then that's where your protection ultimately has to be the strongest, and that's always been known to be that way. Now with MDS, our solution takes that to a different level, because what we're doing now is we're extending your customer's premise out to the cloud. We'll kind of discuss a little bit about how that is the case with our design, but essentially their protection now begins first at the internet, and that's through our data center. In our data centers, we have many data centers across the U.S. and in some other countries as well, and we are able to provide reliable services to our partners in a distributed fashion depending on where the need is. So currently we have data centers in, we have one in Michigan and New Jersey, Colorado, Los Angeles, California. We got Texas, as well as Ontario, Vancouver, London, and I'm probably missing, we have Virginia as well. Might be missing one or two, and we have one in Atlanta currently, and we're standing up a second one in Atlanta as well to kind of boost our performance there out of the Atlanta data center. Essentially, the way our solution works, and you guys might have seen the video already. If you haven't seen the 60-second explainer video, please do so. It's on our landing page. Essentially what that's going to cover, it's going to show you the way we essentially funnel traffic over to our data center is depending on a couple of protocols. When you use depending on the package that you choose, you can choose to connect to MDS in one of a couple of different ways. With any of our subscriptions, you receive a free cloud link, a cloud link device, which I'll show you in the portal how to configure one of those a little bit later in the presentation. That's one of the solutions that you can integrate with MDS. And now a newer release that we have for our partners started very late last year, beginning of this year. We started what we call our BYOG campaign, or Bring Your Own Gateway. Essentially, some partners are comfortable with the performance or reliability that they've come to understand or be comfortable with in their deployments, and maybe they have a wide deployment already of certain technology throughout their customer base. So basically what we understood is that some of our partners said, hey, we like the cloud link. It works for small deployments. It works for flat networks or possibly a couple of segments. But you know what? We really like our sonic walls. We really like our rackness, or we may like our WatchGuard device that's currently deployed because it allows me to configure the network the way I want it to. However, I'm trying to leverage the MDS UTM solution. And that's what we came up with late last year, this year. We began testing with many partners different gateways that interface with our cloud via IPsec tunnel or GRE integration. So essentially, if you have a gateway that will provide IPsec tunnel site to site, then you can connect to our MDS cloud into and integrate and basically get the same experience that you would with a cloud link, with the exception that you'd be dealing with your own hardware that you're used to or that you're comfortable with. Of course, you'd be restricted to the performance of that device that you probably already know and have become accustomed to. So essentially, that's just in a shell. You connect to our cloud via a couple of ways, either a cloud link device or you integrate with the BYOG, your own gateway, using an IPsec tunnel or GRE tunnel to get your traffic routed into our environment. We can get into the nitty-gritty about how that works a little bit later, but essentially just wanted to let you know there's a couple of different ways to connect to us. And we have multiple subscription levels which apply to any way you connect to us. So let's take a look at that and I'll kind of just show you a quick overview of our solutions and in the subscription level that we have to offer. You guys have questions so far about what I've talked about at this point? I know I'm kind of being an overview right now. We'll get into some more details later, but do you have any questions so far? It's like nobody's got questions, so let's keep going then. Essentially, what you're going to see here on this landing page for our services is you're going to find yourself familiarized with a couple of different subscription levels that we have: Lite, Standard, Standard Plus, and Pro. Now, these subscriptions are going to be dependent on the solution you're trying to deliver to your customer. Lite and Standard are good for small offices, flat networks. You're not going to get port forwarding. You're not worried about them having an on-premise email server or web server that they're hosting on site. They literally just want to connect to the internet. Most of their services are hosted, so all you want them to do is to make sure that they're protected. So you can see that the Lite and Standard, the difference between the Lite is that the Lite is limited to 10 users or 10 devices that may be on the customer's network, so it's meant for a small office. The Standard subscription is not restrictive in that manner, so it would basically be the same as the Lite, except without that user restriction. Now, do pay attention to the model that you receive, because there is 10100 interface on the ports for the CloudLink models. That if you choose to use one of our devices, you would be using a 10100 type of device, and you would link up to your customer's internet using one of these. So just think about that restriction. Let's say your customer has 150 meg internet, and they want to use 150 meg, or they want to get as close to that as possible while using MDS. You would probably lean over towards, if you notice over here, 10100 1000 is the Pro subscription. And that model supports faster connections. So just keep that in mind. We have seen performance out of our CloudLink that can reach speeds up to 90 megabits per second, and it really depends on the carrier and the way that they treat the traffic. But essentially, you can expect your customer's network with this particular model for 10100 that branches all the way out to the Standard Plus subscription to achieve anywhere between 85 to 90 megabits per second. Sometimes I've seen it a little bit higher, but reliably somewhere around there, depending on their connection. So just think about that when you go to deploy. And I mentioned our Pro, we've seen that surge all the way up to like 140 megabits per second. So it really depends on the type of application. So just whenever you start talking or interfacing with one of your partners, or your customers rather, you may want to try to understand what their needs are for speeds and what their current ISP speeds are. So anyways, if you notice, let's just go to the top here. All these subscriptions come with virus protection, intrusion protection, data loss or DLP prevention. We have web content filtering for browsing. We have application control, and we have the free CloudLink with all subscription levels. Now, what do each of these mean? Each of these are different engines that are composed of the UTM protection that we provide. Virus protection, obviously, we're looking for signatures. We're looking for patterns that help us identify that this is a virus or a known virus. We do this on the wire, and all our protection is along the wire. So basically, as traffic is going through our data center, we're applying all these engines to the traffic as it's going through our data center. The cool thing about that is our data center can grow rapidly. If we need to grow and expand our resources, we can do that with our data centers. Whereas typically, if you have a firewall you've purchased for your customer on premise, you're stuck with that for 2 to 3 years because, hey, this is a solution you promised would work, and this is going to deliver all the UTM that you promised. You might find yourself that you have to turn on some different engines to make sure that the firewall itself or the gateway can keep up with the amount of traffic being pushed through it. We don't have that kind of problem with our data center. Some of the engines that continue on here, IPS, intrusion prevention. That's to monitor traffic both coming inbound and outbound that may be trying to do some sort of attack or some sort of vulnerability, and leverage that to basically be able to either come inbound into the customer's network or outbound potentially. You'll have some infections that actually try to drop on a customer's network. They'll infect the machine, and then they'll try to replicate that and potentially exploit someone else's network from a network that is not their own. Hackers love doing that and using jump points, if you will, for their attacks. So we detect this in both directions. Data loss prevention. So credit card loss. PCI compliance requires that credit cards are not sent in plain text, that they are encrypted when they're being sent, and this includes HTTP, web browsing, and email. So we are able to flag credit cards as they're being sent in different protocols and block them and message the user and let them know, hey, you're trying to send some DLP leak was detected, and essentially letting them know that they're trying to send credit card data unencrypted. So that's one of the features that the engine provides. Web content filtering, it's going to apply to a couple of different categories. Basically, if you want to allow a certain content for a business, let's say your business is in marketing and they're on Facebook and they're on, probably not MySpace anymore, but they're on Facebook all day long. They're on social networks all day long, Instagram, etc. You're probably going to have their security at a different level than you would for somebody that maybe is very, very strict and compliant with their employees only browsing certain websites that are pertaining to business. So there's a different sliding scale that lets you adjust that. I will show you guys what that means. But web content filtering is basically category-based filtering that we would apply against websites, either by DNS name, so by domain name and categories within those domains, as well as IP content reputation would also be potentially filtered out here with the web content engine. The next engine that we have is application control. Application control takes a look at the actual data that's flowing on the wire. It looks like at the headers and the packets and tries to determine what type of traffic that is coming across the wire. So we're able to do things like if somebody downloads a Facebook Messenger application that is a desktop application and possibly not even interfacing via HTTP or HTTPS, we can detect the type of traffic that's going across, categorize that, and then also apply some restrictions to it based on the portal settings. And I'll show you guys that when we get to the portal. And that's basically the different UTM engines. We have some other things such as DDoS prevention. DDoS attack prevention that we apply at our data center level, and some other protections that we have. But this is the type of protection that you're going to sell to your customer that they're interested in learning about. So as I mentioned, that comes with all our subscription levels. They all come with remote access. Remote access being a web-based GUI access that they can log into using their web browser. This allows them to do like a one-click to launch a shortcut, for example, to an RDP session. Instead of having to do port forwarding and expose an RDP session via a port forward, you can just actually have them log into a portal that you can enable for your customer. They would log in there and potentially click this RDP link to get to their desktop when they're on the road. There's also a beta on that, which lets us do a remote client. We would use the FortiClient by FortiGate. It allows them to connect back into their office, essentially using a thin VPN client, and that would allow them to talk to resources back at the office. And that's in beta right now, but that is something that's currently working. As well as all other levels have Wi-Fi. We have the ability to do security bypass, which is, hey, we trust this destination, such as a VoIP server. We want to let it go through. That's what a security bypass is. We'll look at that too in the portal. Malicious activity alerts, the way that works is our crew, our support crew that's monitoring these systems is going to get notified whenever we have any type of malicious activity. We vet those events to make sure that there's something that the partner needs to action, because there's blocks all day long for things like categories that you don't want people going to. You don't want them going to weapons or pornography, other adult material, or potentially going to Facebook, things like that get blocked all day long. You don't necessarily need to know about that every time. However, if we have an alert that, hey, looks like somebody brought a laptop into your office with a BitLocker on it or with CryptoLocker on it, and we're seeing an attempt to connect outbound to a known Command and Conquer server, or Command and Control server, you may have that type of activity, and guess what? We're going to get that alert. We're going to make sure that it's legit, and we're going to reach out to you and let you know, hey, here's the IP address, the source machine, here's the information that we have. We add to that information as much as we can so that our partners are armed and ready to go if that situation should ever arise, to go clean up, remediate that infection for that particular machine. So that's the type of notifications you will receive from us. Now we have third-party MDS Connect. That's actually what was formerly known as BYOG. It's now known as BYOG, but essentially that is available through all our subscription levels. I think we might have opened it up all the way to Lite, so I'll have to fix this chart if so. but that's the ability to integrate your own device. Static IP, this is important to pay attention to this, because if you have a customer with a server on site, a web server or web hosting, or if you have, for example, a video server they need to access remotely on site, you're going to want to make sure they get a static public IP. With MDS, when you connect to us, you send all your traffic through our data center. Your new egress, like I mentioned earlier, would be our data center, which means your ingress would also be through our data center. So traffic coming back in is going to hit our data center first and be filtered. So when you're doing things like port forwarding, you're going to be port forwarding from our data center. So when you have a static IP address, let's say locally at the customer location, that traffic is not going to be useful in the sense that MDS is now your ingress and egress. So coming in, your new public IP that you're going to use for your port forwarding is going to have to be through our data center, so you'll have to get the right subscription level if you want a public IP, a static IP available for port forwarding. So you're going to want to get a standard plus subscription or higher to enable you to do that. And that allows us to protect the connections coming inbound into the customer's network. Port forwarding, essentially the same thing here. And content, allow, and blocking. I believe we might have opened that up to other subscription levels. We'll see that momentarily when we jump from the portal. So I know I've gone over a lot here. This is just a quick chart for you to tell what subscription level you might want to jump into. You know, the other biggest thing I think some partners are interested in from time to time is our multi-site VPN configuration. So this is a hub and spoke type of configuration. You would basically have a pro subscription to start out. If you notice, pro is the one highlighted here. A pro subscription would give you your base to start out from. Let's say your customer has 3 locations. Their main office gets a pro. And let's say you have 2 remote offices, or maybe one of the CEOs loves to work from home and has a home office, needs always on site-to-site VPN. Essentially, you would purchase any other subscription level after you purchase a pro, and you can tack on to this multi-site. The cool thing about that is it essentially connects each of the cloud links, or if you integrate an IPsec tunnel, each of the tunnels connect to our data center individually. And then that traffic is able to route back to each of the other locations, corresponding locations that you designate as a multi-site. So that's what a multi-site VPN is for. Some of our partners have used that successfully. Some people like to have if you have your own, for example, your own gateway, you can still continue using your own site-to-site VPNs if you prefer not to use our multi-site. So just keep that in mind. So that is essentially a summary of what you get with each of these. You're welcome to come back here, and if you have more questions about it, we'd be glad to answer those to you. But this is essentially what each of our subscription levels offers. Now, I actually want to show you the portal to kind of give you a good glimpse of what our partners go in and use when they go to deploy one of our cloud links or even an IPsec tunnel. It's fairly easy to use and easy to jump into. And while I'm getting connected and situated, do you guys have any questions at this point so far that you want to ask? Just one in the chat. And what do we got here? Would throughput be slower with BYOG versus MDS? That is dependent on the model, and this is a question from Ruben. Yes, actually with BYOG, it depends on the throughput capabilities of the device that you're working on. So, for example, we've been doing some testing this year with different vendors, and we've seen the performance kind of vary. I would take a look at your preferred model and see what they list on the data sheet for the throughput speeds that they are saying that they can achieve with that particular model. We've seen that some of the vendors may exaggerate a little bit on what they get, but our data centers do not have a cap on throughput, so essentially it is going to be the unit that you're using, that's the throughput that's going to be restrictive, as well as ISP. So that's going to be how you determine what kind of speeds you can achieve. I will send everybody a link. Actually, I may have Michael share it out to the audience. Can you share out the link for BYOG? Essentially, we have a couple models that we're running through and testing. We have a group that that does the testing with these, and they post the kind of configuration. And if you see a model listed on there, we should be able to get some stats for you. So if you have one that you're interested in this list that Michael's going to send, then let us know, and we'll try to get you what throughput we were seeing from our end. And I see a question from Brett, any chance VLANs will be extended to other levels? The restriction is actually physical on the Cloud Link. If we're talking about VLANs per, if we're talking about VLANs per subscription level, the actual physical limitations are going to be on the Cloud Link itself. The Cloud Link that's included with the Pro allows us to create multiple networks, and the way that works is it lets us split up those ports into a combination of 2 segments or 4 segments. If you notice, there's 8 ports on the LAN. We would actually physically separate those ports, and then you would hand off those VLANs to the Pro unit, to the corresponding segments, and you're able to configure your protection for each of those segments in the wizard. Once we get to the wizard, you'll kind of see how that works. But no, as of right now, it's restricted to the Pro. Now, I do know that we are looking at extending this hardware model. We might have a partner, for example, that has no need for port forwarding and wants a standard, but doesn't necessarily like the fact that he's restricted to a 10100 interface. So we're working currently on being able to offer a faster or a better interface speed with the Pro. So we're working on a method to allow partners to purchase the Pro model, the hardware on the Cloud Link, for any other subscription level that you might need that faster speed on, because some partners do need that. With that being said, once that capability is available, the hardware will be present to allow multiple segments, multiple networks. So I would say that once that feature is put in, then it would actually allow the possibility for us to do VLAN handling on other subscription levels. So I hope that answers your question. And let me see what other questions we have here. So Jay has a question about the Pro having 2 WAN ports. The 2 WAN ports are going to be not your typical failover. It's going to be a hard failover. So it's going to be if somebody, for example, or if you lose power to the other interface, let's say you have a Comcast for primary and you have Time Warner for secondary. Well, now that they bought each other, it doesn't matter. But let's say you have cable for your primary and DSL for your secondary on your WAN ports. The way that's going to work is you're going to have a static IP on your primary WAN, and your secondary is going to be DHCP. The only way that's going to fail over is if it's a physical failover. So if the power goes out to your cable internet and that port goes down, then it will try to switch over to the other port and lease an IP from your other, ISP provider on the second port. That's how that works. But the type of load balancing I think that some of us have come to think about when you have multiple connections or failover scenarios, you're going to want to use potentially a model that you're familiar with. There's some other models that allow you to do like an active passive type of failover in heartbeat configuration. You can do something more complicated like that with your own models. The Cloud Link has good intentions on the Pro for that failover, and it works on a hard failover type of situation. But let's say that that port doesn't go down. You might have problems with your traffic on your primary internet. It's not going to fail over. It's not that complicated. So as far as QoS is concerned, though, no matter where your Cloud Link is located, if you plug a Cloud Link in, let's say you take a customer's Cloud Link from their office and you plug it in at home, and you have port forwarding on this particular Cloud Link. Let's say you have a standard plus. You take that Cloud Link, you move it to home, you plug it in on your different ISP. It comes online. As far as our data center is concerned, you're connected, and we see your private IP addresses. We see the internal devices connected now to this network. Your public IP is actually not going to change. I know it's kind of crazy, but let's say your customer cuts over from one ISP to another. In that scenario with those 2 ports, even though you're connecting to us, the egress is our data center, so your external exposure for that customer is going to be the same external IP address. With that being said, all the configuration and all the UTM and QoS is taking place in our data center. So no matter how you're connected to our data center, the QoS is going to apply. We do prefer VoIP traffic above other traffic. Obviously, we want to have that traffic prioritized, as well as some communication applications such as Skype for voice. So we do have that built into our data center, and that QoS is being handled via the tunnel and at our data center. So that's how that works. I hope that answers your question. And let me see if I have another question here. Data center. Yep, I think that's the data centers. We're still actively raising data centers and starting data centers in different areas, and there's a different team that takes care of that. And I think somebody mentioned Phoenix. We do have data centers in LA and in Dallas. So we have data centers kind of on both sides of you. We've seen pretty awesome performance. For example, I have Verizon using my standard subscription. Verizon Fios 50 meg up and down. I've achieved 55 megabits per second connecting to our Toronto data center over a cloud link with UTM turned on. So just keep that in mind. Even at longer distances, the reason that works a little better is because we peer with our data centers. They do a lot of peering with internet providers, with ISPs. So it allows less hops and higher speed peering to connect to our data centers. So hopefully that answers your question there. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump into the portal. I don't want to get time to get away from us. I want to jump into the portal and show you how you would configure one of our devices. Let's say you placed an order for a cloud link. MDSmanager.com is the portal for our partners to log into. And I'm going to use a colleague's account here that we just set up for testing. And this account gets created when you're a new partner. It gets created whenever you sign up with our sales folks. You'll be able to get one of these accounts created. You'll get an email confirming when your account gets created, and you'll be able to log in and take a look at different subscriptions that you've ordered. This is a landing page for a partner. As you can see under My Subscriptions, I have a tab called Active. You'll see some other quote-unquote tabs show up if you have orders pending or orders. You might have some devices in your inventory, so you may have a cloud link in your inventory. Those would pop up if you have any items there. In this case, we only have one subscription, and this is Michael's house. Now, he's previously set up and configured, so there's some residual information here, but it has been wiped out and reset. But basically, in this landing page, you're going to see a couple of different things across the top, just to kind of briefly show you what you have here. Home takes you right back to the same landing page. The partner menu, you have a couple options here. What I think you're going to want to, on your own time, when you get a chance to take a look at partner profile is where you configure who you are as a partner. You're going to type in things such as your PayPal, or if you have your bank account information that you want to direct deposit into, you would type that in. And there's some other neat little settings here. If you hover over these, you'll get a little bit of detail on what these do. But essentially, this is configuring Shield test. And Adam, I'm not sure if you're on the phone at the moment or if you're listening in. Shield test, have any of the partners seen how Shield test works? The branding, have they gone over that yet? I'm not sure, Adam. If you're talking, Adam, you're on mute. Not sure if you're there. Well, basically, Shield test, if you guys haven't seen it yet, we'll go over it in a little bit. This is the ability for you to customize Shield test for your own purposes. Shield test is a way that we've developed to test security, current security at your customer's network. If you go up to one of their computers behind their current gateway or their current firewall and run shieldtest.com, it's gonna basically run through a couple of tests that will simulate credit card attempts to steal credit card information and attempt to inject a virus. It's a test virus, but it's a virus still that should be flagged. And a couple of other attacks, like an attempt to do a server-side or a client-side attack. So we emulate these, and you can use this tool for sales purpose and for the fact to make sure that you're being protected with the current solution that you have. Once you integrate your customers with MDS, you would use that tool to show them, hey, now that you have MDS, guess what? You're being protected. I'll show you how that works here in a little bit. Let's go back to the landing page here. There's a couple other options in partner menu, so take some time to get familiarized with that. If you have questions on this section, I'd recommend you talk to Adam or whoever your sales contact may be. They're going to be able to lead you through this a little bit better. and kind of answer some of the questions you might have. These are meant for sales purposes, but as I mentioned, you do some configuration for your Shield test here. And basically, you have the option to order a subscription from this menu here and make a couple of changes, pretty self-explanatory. If you notice, there's an option to order from here, and there's an option to order down here, or it would essentially take you to the same place. There's also some neat shortcuts here to Shield test, which is what I mentioned earlier. Some of the videos that we have put together for you, there's kind of an explainer video and a couple other things on how to do your branding. If you click on videos, you'll see how that gets you over to getting that ran. Let's see here. And then data sheets. Data sheets are rebranded material that will actually be able to, you'll be able to use with your customers and be able to, let me actually not pop those open here, but essentially co-branding information that pulls data from when you configure your partner profile. It will show you some of the co-branding that becomes available to you once you become one of our partners. It essentially takes some data sheets that we have available for sale, as a sale tool for your customers to present to them your solution that you have while you're partnering with MDS. So it's got some nice stats in there and some details that can help basically accomplish your sales goals with your customers. Anyways, I think that's going to be more of a sales take on that. Adam, if you want to cover that in a little bit, maybe we can go over that in a second. You're more familiar with the branding and co-branding for sales purposes. Anyways, let's take a look at this particular subscription right here. Let's see here. So whenever you place an order with MDS, you're going to end up with one of these devices in your screen. You're going to have a setup device as an option. That's going to be the telltale sign that this is a brand new cloud link. It'll actually say new cloud link up here, or new subscription, and you're going to have the option to run through the setup wizard. The setup wizard is pretty basic. I'm going to take a little bit of time to kind of describe each of the items, but you're going to find that you're going to be able to fly through this wizard pretty quickly once you get this under your belt. This configuration wizard essentially makes changes that live in our data center, the data center that you're assigned to. When a cloud link connects, it downloads this information that it uses then to configure the customer's settings that you chose, such as their local LAN segment, whether DHCP is turned on or off, etc. And we'll go through that in a second. And essentially, on this page, you'll notice that the public IP is 1070. That's the public IP for our data center. So if this cloud link comes online and you're connected to it, you run IP chicken, that's going to be your public IP. And remember I mentioned earlier that you have the ability to initiate remote access with each of these subscription levels. They're all included. If you turn on remote access, you notice it's not enabled right now, but if you turn it on, this link will get you logged in. But let's get that configured first before we take a look at that. So let's go ahead and run through the setup for the first cloud link. And before I get started, do we have any questions at the moment? Let me take a look. Let's see here. How can you tell which device you are looking at in the portal, Lite or Pro? Actually, if you click on this invoice button right here, you're going to get your status. You're going to get a serial number. Serial number is going to tell you if you're using a cloud link. If you're using an IPsec tunnel, it's actually going to say IPsec here. If you notice down here in the bottom left, I also have a serial number. That's going to tell me that that's a cloud link. And if you run the setup, we're actually going to be able to see that as well. But essentially, that's how you can tell if you are looking at the type of subscription that you have. Click on invoice, and you're going to give your subscription obviously a descriptive title, so you'll be able to tell what subscription you're looking at when you jump into the portal. But if you want to look at the type of subscription and the cost, you're going to jump into the invoice tab, and it'll show you what subscription level you have for that particular cloud link. Let's go ahead and run through the setup now. So this is a picture of a 14C, is the cloud link that you would receive with Standard, Standard Plus, and the Lite subscription as well. By the way, I'm sorry, I meant to point this out. If you guys see here on the left, it says online right now. If you take a cloud link and you plug it into your customer's network, you can run through the setup on site. We have, it'll automatically come up with a temporary SSID for you to connect to. and it will allow you to basically, it'll redirect you to this portal to sign in and run the configuration. I would recommend that you run the setup before you even show up to the customer location, because the cool thing is you can plug it in at your current office and run through it to make sure it's working. You get familiar with it. You can pre-deploy it essentially in your office without even going to the customer location. So essentially, I wanted to show you that it's currently online. Let's say I'm setting this up for Michael's, not Michael's house, but Michael's grandma's house. I tested it out here first. Let's run through the setup wizard and make sure we can get it configured. Looks like we have another question. We have yet to see DMCA notices being sent, just because we do a good job of covering the content filtering that we provide for our partners, so we actually haven't had that happen. But the public IP is owned by MDS, so that's something that MDS would help manage. But essentially, yeah, I don't know if I could actually ask that question to another member to see if they have an answer for that. But essentially, we do a pretty good job of filtering content, BitTorrent, things like that people like to use to download illegal content. That's why we want to make sure our partners have all their customers with security turned on. So that actually hasn't been an issue yet, to answer your question, Britt. But I'll get an answer for you, and we'll get that sent over to you at a later time. So let's go through the configuration wizard really quick. The first page you're presented with is the profile for the customer. So we have a couple of options here. These will help us determine the type of customer that you're dealing with, the type of traffic that we should be seeing, to help us determine what kind of things should be considered and what kind of things should be essentially filtered out. So you'll have a couple. Let's say your customer is an office and an accounting office or a law office, etc. You would pick on the left the category, on the right your industry, and this helps configure a couple of things on the back end as you run on the fly. That's a very basic setup here. Let's go to the next screen here. And this is where you tell MDS the type of systems that the customer is using. Let's say they're using one of these POS systems. You want to select the vendor. You want to select. Let's see here. You want to select the particular system that they're using. And if this is something that we don't currently have listed, please do go ahead and add it here, because we do want to know if there's another system that we need to consider for our partners that we need to tweak or to improve our filtering to look out for specific traffic for that vendor. So let's say I have a POS called unknown POS, and I want to add that one. So that lets MDS know that you're also running some additional software that we haven't been particularly configured in our environment. So keep that in mind. And let's go to the next screen. This is where you get to label your deployment. This is how you'll identify your customer's screen whenever, your customer's cloud link or subscription whenever you jump into the portal. And this is just a generic name. It just reflects when you go to look throughout your system. That's where you're going to see this name reflected. It doesn't change anything specific. And that's all this really is naming the configuration. If you notice, Michael has a port 28C. Now for this particular one, we're just going to do a simple one-segment network. We're not going to do anything complicated. There's multiple networks. But let's just go ahead and name this SSID here. We will create an SSID for you if you so choose to use a built-in wireless. You can use a built-in wireless, or you can customize SSID to match your customer's current network. If you're replacing their current SSID, you can go ahead and do that. And configure your password. And that is going to be your SSID for this first network. You can turn the physical LAN ports if you want. You can turn those off. Some of our customers like to use their own DHCP servers. If you have an on-premise DNS/DHCP server that you want to use, you're going to want to turn this off. And you're going to want to make sure that that DNS and DHCP server is connected to the LAN ports on the cloud link that you so choose to deploy. It's got to be on the internal network. So you would turn this off if you want to use your own, or you can use a built-in the built-in DHCP server that MDS would provide you. You have the ability to change your start and end IP ranges here for your DHCP scope. Obviously, keep in mind, if you have static devices in there, in that range, you're going to want to adjust this or move your static devices outside of that scope. DNS servers, they're defaulting to the Google DNS servers. They do pretty good with anycasting, so usually DNS from Google is pretty stinking quick. But if you have your own DNS server here, let's say there's an internal DNS server that you want to use, you would go ahead and apply that internal DNS server here. And if you want to point it to there first, and then secondary external DNS, you can do that as well. Now, this option here would be if you had a multi-site, you would be turning on multi-network routing. We don't have multi-site enabled here, so we're not going to turn that on. And MDS will create an internal network for you that we'll design that's automatically assigned. You, of course, can change this. If, let's say, our customer has an IP address of 192.168.1.1, as many of your customers probably do, your gateway is 1.1. And here's a really interesting thing. When you think about MDS, I keep mentioning that your traffic's being tunneled to us. So let's say at your customer site you have a Comcast modem with an IP address of 192.168.1.1, and that's your gateway. You have a printer, you have a server, you have a couple of machines that have static IP, and they're all pointing to 192.168.1.1 already. Now, I can actually configure my Cloud Link and drop it in between the Comcast modem. I plug it into the LAN port on the Comcast modem, and then I take my switch, my internal switch, and I plug it into the LAN port on the Cloud Link for MDS. It will not cause a conflict, even though I have duplicate IP addresses. And you're thinking to yourself, well, that goes against all the networking that I've ever known. Yes, it went against mine too. Here's why. Because all the traffic from the LAN ports on a Cloud Link, once they hit the interface, the WAN interface, at that point, the traffic's all tunneled. So traffic coming out of the WAN port on the Cloud Link is, at that point, tunneled, and the rest of your upstream traffic has no idea that that's there. So essentially, as far as your Comcast modem would know, if you have a Cloud Link plugged into a LAN port, it thinks it's just another device plugged in with a MAC address assigned to the Cloud Link, and it's talking on UDP port 5246. That's how we do our tunneling with the Cloud Links. So essentially, as far as your upstream traffic, let's say you have a video server or you have something else plugged in to another LAN port, it will not be able to talk to the LAN network or segment that's plugged into the Cloud Link's LAN ports. So it's very important to remember that. Once traffic from the LAN ports on the Cloud Link hit the WAN, it becomes tunneled. And as far as your traffic is concerned, on the LAN side of the Cloud Link, its next hop is our data center, because that's the gateway as far as your clients are concerned. It has no idea that it's going through Comcast hop first, and then through the networks that it takes to get to our data center. At that point, its next hop is going to be our data center. And the reason I say this is because the cool thing about this is, let's say you want to trial this out or test this out on an existing network, but you don't want to go around and start changing gateway IP addresses and things like that. You're not going to want to do that. Give me 1 second. Let's see, which one is that? Sorry, I think I forgot to close one app. So essentially, you're going to be sorry guys, let me message this really quick. Okay, so essentially, traffic, once it hits the LAN port, it's going to hit next hop your data center. Sorry guys. Essentially, you're going to be your next hop is going to be our data center, and the traffic coming inbound is also not going to know anything about the upstream network. So Comcast, as far as it's concerned, it sees one client and it's sending all its traffic UDP 5246 up to our data center. Now, if you're using an IPsec tunnel, that's a little different, because IPsec tunnel you can configure however you see fit within your own gateway. If you want to send traffic to us, you're essentially going to set your default route is going to be MDS. So you configure an IPsec tunnel, you create a default route, and you send it to our data center. So it's a little different on an IPsec tunnel than it is on a Cloud Link. But on a Cloud Link, just once again, traffic does not know about upstream network traffic. that's local to your customer's network, and vice versa. So anyways, the point is you can actually drop this. I can take this right here and drop it into my customer that has 192.168.1.1 Comcast modem. I'm going to put the cloud link in there, and it's not going to conflict with that gateway. That's the cool thing. If I have issues or I don't want to use MDS anymore, I pull it right back out. Guess what? All my clients still think it's the same gateway. You might have to reboot a client or two to get new DHCP if you're relying on DHCP for those clients. But keep that in mind. That's a cool thing that you can do here. And then we get to the portion that lets you specify security. Once I get done with this section, I'll look at the questions here, guys, and then we'll take a break there and then keep going. But essentially, security on or off. The reason you would ever want to turn this off is if, let's say, you put MDS in and you start having problems with a specific service that the customer is used to using, you would turn security off and allow that traffic to flow through and see if the problem goes away. You turn it back on, hey, guess what? The problem's back. Well, at that point, you can do one of two things. You can turn off content filtering. Content filtering is going to disengage our web filtering, so our web filter engine, as well as the application control engine. So that's your option. You can turn off content filtering, try it again. Hey, guess what? I turned it off, problem's gone. And security's still on. So that tells me that the problem is with my application control or my web filtering. Turn it back on, problem's back. Okay, send us a ticket, talk to MDS support, and we'll get you figured out. We'll look through our logs, figure out what's blocking the application you might be having a problem with, or if there's something else that we need to do to fix it on the back end, we'll take care of it for you. That's the only time you want to turn off security. Typically, you don't want to leave it on because it's going to be preventing a bunch of attacks, antivirus, DLP, IPS. You're going to want to leave that stuff on. Content filtering, IP reputation, things like that. You don't want to leave that on. All right, and content filtering, we found that typically our partners were falling into an issue where they would potentially over customize something, and somebody would go in there and, hey, I don't like the way this is customized. I'm going to change it this way. You'll end up having some gaps in security. So for that purpose, we made it very simple for our partners to adjust security to different levels. And I'm going to ask Michael to send you guys the fact page, the FAQ, frequently asked question page, that describes what each of these levels does. But essentially, on a very, very basic level, strict is going to block things that are time wasters. So potentially like Facebook or things like streaming radio like Pandora. You may not want to have that up and running in the environment. They want to save bandwidth and they want to focus on work. You're going to want to use strict. Moderate is going to have a little more leniency. It's going to give you a couple of applications such as Facebook, and it may allow some moderate streaming. But guess what? I'm still getting blocks. There's still some things that it's being too restrictive on my customer. They want to use lenient. It's best to leave it on lenient than to leave it on off. You're going to want content filtering doing its thing. And then there's a couple of options that we have outside of this wizard that's going to let you adjust this to a couple of different levels. Let's say something falls outside of this lenient, strict, or moderate categories. You're going to be able to adjust that. So let's talk about that when we get done with this wizard. I'll show you guys how to create some bypasses. For now, we're just going to leave it on. Let's leave it on strict. And I'm going to, before I hit next, I'm going to see what kind of comments we have here. All right, and let's see where I leave off. If a customer has a static IP from ISP, do you need to set it on the MDS? That depends on the modem. So let's say you plug your laptop into the customer's WAN port. If it leases a public IP to your laptop, then it's going to do the same for the cloud link. It'll lease an IP address, a public IP address out to us on the WAN port. If that's how it works, then you don't need to set a static IP on the cloud link. If your ISP will not hand out, they're not going to hand out or lease out a public IP address, and you have to statically or manually assign that on your network card, once again, like if you're using your laptop to test, then you're going to want to set a static IP address on the cloud link. We have a tool to configure a static IP on the cloud link. And if you need help with that, there's an article, if you want to send an article, Michael, there's an article for setting your cloud link static IP. And we'll be glad to help you and go through that the first time if you need our assistance. But yeah, you don't have to set it if they're leasing out public IPs. Better yet, if your customer finds that they love MDS and they don't want to move off of it, you can have them remove the static IP if it's expensive. They don't have to use a static IP address because if you're using a standard plus subscription or a pro subscription with MDS, the static IP that we assign is actually assigned in our data center. No matter if you switch ISP carriers or you switch to someone else, yes, that link, please. Yeah, essentially, you're going to be able to keep that IP address even between carriers. You don't have to have a public static IP address with their ISP anymore. They can actually switch back to dynamic should they choose not to have a static IP address anymore from their carrier, because the port forwarding is going to be taken care of by MDS at our data center. At that point, you do not have to have static IP from the carrier. And Michael just posted the link there configuring the public IP address on a cloud link. Looking for the next question here. How do we segregate LAN ports on MDS? So the pro subscription level, if you noticed, it had listed up to 4 VLANs. If you want to segregate traffic on, if you're talking about multiple segments beyond just segregating between Wi-Fi and WAN, Wi-Fi and LAN, then the pro subscription is what you're looking for. The pro subscription lets you do either 2 or 4 networks, and if I was to choose that subscription level, I would actually, this is not a pro subscription, so I can't see it here, but you would actually be able to choose how many networks you want to run on the pro, and then you would configure this particular screen for each segment, and you would see that this is network 1 of 2. You're able to cut a pro into either a set of 2 sets of 4 ports, which would give you 2 segments, or you can cut it into pairs of 2, which would give you 4 segments. So the way that that's cut out, it's actually segmented physically on the cloud link. So for example, let's say I want 2 segments. I would say, hey, I want 2 networks. First network is going to be ports 1 through 4. The second network is going to be ports 5 through 8. And then people like to ask me, okay, so now we have physical ports separated. How do I hand off VLAN traffic onto that? Well, you're going to use your switch. Currently, how you have your VLANs already configured. What you would do is you would put, depending on the vendor or switch vendor that you use, you would hand off traffic to us untagged. So the native VLAN ID for the port, let's say you have a VLAN 100 and a VLAN 200. VLAN 100 would hand off into any port 1 through 4. You'd physically plug it in there, and you would make it native VLAN 100, but you would hand off that traffic untagged to us. So your switch would handle the actual VLAN traffic, and it would know that, hey, this port is native VLAN, but it's untagged, and that's where your gateway is going to be. Your second port, let's say you have VLAN 200, you would have another port on your switch. Its native VLAN would be VLAN 200, and you would hand off untagged traffic, and you would run a cable between port 5 to 8, any of those ports that you so choose to. So that's how you would physically segment different networks on different ports. I hope that answers your question. And then we have another question. What website categories does each level block? That is the link that Michael sent in the description. And it's kind of hard to read there. Michael, can you send the link as well, please? Yeah. Send the link? Okay. Yes. So top facts, top FAQs. If you take a look at that link, it's a little more readable there. So take a look at that description, and that's going to give you a little more insight into what each category is blocking. We have another question here. I think we're good so far through this screen. Let me go ahead and run through this configuration here. As I mentioned, we have Wi-Fi turned on. I called my SSID MDS123. Here's my password. I have Ethernet ports turned on. HTTP, I'm using it from MDS. And I have my customized LAN as 192.168.1.1. I have security on and set to strict. Now we have a couple more options. Password bypass is going to let you override specific websites. Let's say on Pandora, I want to allow people to type in a username and password for specific people to let them stream Pandora on a authentication basis. So basically, they have to use a username and password that you would assign here. So I'm going to go ahead and create Pandora 1 as my test And we have the ability to turn on an additional SSID. All subscription levels come with this. It would be a guest network. The guest network is predefined, so basically you would turn on guest and this is predefined for subscription levels that are on the 14C, which would be Lite, Standard, and Standard Plus. If you get the Pro model with up to 4 segments, you can turn on Wi-Fi for each of those segments and create whatever custom Wi-Fi names and passwords you want for each of those. In this case, since I think this is a standard subscription, I have the options between 4 different networks. I would have Open, which is guest network with no password. Open plus web content filter, which means I'm applying strict content filtering to this wireless network, no password required to join. And this is the SSID here. And then I have password, which is going to give me this SSID, MDS_guest, password guest Wi-Fi. Now I want password plus web content filtering. Once again, this is going to be strict content filter, and you would type in the password right here. And that's the SSID that corresponds. Pretty self-explanatory. Like I mentioned, this is going to be included. If you want to turn it on or off for your customers, you would do this either in a Lite, Standard, or Standard Plus subscription. You do have the option to move up to a Pro, and you can segment that into 4 different networks, and you can combine those into wireless or wired-only networks however you want, including changing the SSID and passwords for each of those. So keep that in mind if you need more than one SSID. And the remote access VPN, just for my sanity's sake, I'm going to call it Pandora 1, just so I can remember. And I'm going to create a bookmark to a server. I don't have my virtual environment up today, or I'd show you guys how this works. But essentially, once I have my Cloud Link up and running, I'm going to be able to RDP to my server. And that's really how simple you would set up a bookmark. That's how simple that is. I'm going to go ahead and hit next here. And basically, I'm left with is a summary of all the changes that I did and all configuration settings that I chose. And when I'm ready to set this configuration over to the data center and basically the node that I'm connected to, I'm going to hit finish. And you notice the name changed here. And let me see. See if you guys can see. There's a lot of networks here. MDS, what did I call it? 1, 2 here. Sorry guys, I don't remember what I call the network. It's really easy to jump back into the configuration screen though. MDS 1, 2, 3. My Mac's a little slow at picking up the network sometimes. I'll let it search for it. But essentially, that's how you configure a Cloud Link. Michael, see if you can see that wireless network when it comes up.
I just saw it come offline.
Okay, cool. So it's in the configuration now. Once that applies, we may share Michael's screen. We may not. If you're ready to share, Michael, let me know. We may share his screen so that way you guys can see what it looks like from his laptop. Okay, so he's seeing the network now. Go ahead and connect to it. Password is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Very secure. And once you get connected, we'll present your screen just for a second so they can see your IP address is now reflecting 10.70. Let me know when you're ready. In the meantime, while Michael's getting ready for that, he might have to rejoin the meeting. I'm going to show you the shortcut here. I do know that Chrome and IE turned off certain plugins. So for this to work, you're going to have to use Firefox for your customers. It depends on a couple of plugins. But essentially, I'm going to log into this web portal. And in this web portal, if you notice, I have my shortcut here that I created earlier, RDP server 1. And you notice the IP address there. That's the IP address that I added during the wizard. So let's say you have a server at 1.10, and you would literally just type in RDP. You can call it whatever you want. Type in the IP address that server is going to have. Hopefully, you configure a static IP address for a server, and then you can go ahead and use the shortcut. Like I said, I don't have it currently online, or I would show you guys this. Usually, I have a virtual environment to show you the shortcuts. But essentially, you click this. It uses a plugin in the browser. If you notice up here, I'm getting prompted to allow the plugin. And that's what I would have to do. You click here, and it launches Java environment to launch the shortcut in RDP to the server. Now, a lot of partners have customers deployed with things like LogMeIn or TeamViewer or a couple other remote solutions. If it's affordable for your customer and it's already a solution that they're used to using with their iPads and their tablets and their phones, it's probably going to be a better bet for you. This is a nice-to-have feature, but it's not meant for tons of mobile clients. It's going to be hey, guess what? You happen to be able to do RDP without having to expose port forward or open up a machine potentially to the internet. So this is an option that you guys have to use it. And if you guys ever get down the path of using this remote access, let me know, and let support know. We'll help you out configuring it. So let me go ahead and log out of here. All right, so let me make sure I don't have any questions here in the meantime. Other than the Pro, we'll be able to change the SSID password for the guest in upcoming releases. I know we've had that request before. I don't know where that is. And remember how I mentioned earlier that we're looking at the possibility, or actually I know that we're working on the ability to purchase a Pro, the hardware that comes with the Pro subscription, for other subscription levels. I would say that once we have that hardware available there, that opens up the possibility for us to have multiple segments of networks and the ability for us to customize those networks, because you would have the ability at that point to have multiple segments. So I would think we first need to accomplish that milestone to let you purchase the faster hardware, and then that gives us the ability to actually leverage that additional hardware in different ways. So I would think the time will come. I just know that's not currently on our roadmap. But I know that is a request that's been on our radar, so do know that. So as of now, no, not that I know of, but that's not something I wouldn't put out of our minds that we might be able to push that downstream to lower subscription levels in the future. And, oh, by the way, you could always use your own access points with any subscription levels. If you wanted to use your own AP, let's say your customer's larger clients has larger office, if you want to deploy your own access points, you can totally do that. You can plug it in downstream, and you can have whatever SSIDs you want. Of course, in this case, we're talking about guest Wi-Fi. You probably don't want your guest traffic mixing in with your production traffic. So that's why it's nice to have a CloudLink Pro, because you can segment that traffic separately from each other. You could always do potentially, if you were to put the CloudLink into a LAN port, you could plug in your own access point on the side, if you will, onto another free LAN port if you choose to send your guest traffic outside of MDS. So that's a possibility too. But as I mentioned, I know that's currently not an option with the lower subscription levels, but that's not something I would put out of our minds, because I know that request has come up and it is in our minds. So hope that answers that question. And let me take a look here. I think it's. You know what? Let me change the. Let's see here. Hey, actually, Adam, are you there? I'm not sure if Adam is there.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm back.
Do you want to show the guys? I'm not sure. Have you gone over Shield test or the branding portion of the portal?
Yeah, we have, for the most part. I mean, I think Ruben and Jay, Britt. I don't know if we got into that with Britt yet. He signed on kind of towards the end of the day on Friday, and we're just really getting him going. I'm pretty sure that Craig and Brant, those guys with Dean, typically we both try to walk them through that on our initial portal setup. But if you guys can speak up if you feel like you want to see that. I think everybody's pretty familiar with the Shield test. And
yeah, no problem. Okay, if they've seen that, that's great. I realize I've been kind of long-winded, guys, and I don't want to keep you here much longer. I want to leave some time for questions and an open discussion. So let me do this. I'm going to kind of give you guys a couple of pointers and things that I've seen. When installing, let's say if you want to go with the CloudLink installation, When you deploy a cloud link, like I mentioned earlier, traffic becomes tunneled. Your new public interface is going to be, for your customer, it's going to be one of our data centers. So if you notice here, public IP 192.223.1070, that's going to be my new public IP when I'm streaming out to the internet. That's going to be my customer's IP. So what you're going to want to do is keep in mind if your customer has things like an email server on site or a web server, keep DNS records in mind. You need time for propagation for things like email servers. I typically suggest if somebody's changing over to a standard plus or a pro and they're leveraging our port forwarding, you're going to want to make sure that you're taking into account your DNS records to use a new public IP address, because you will not be able to use the previous static IP address with your ISP, with the customer's ISP. So keep that in mind. Another thing that I can suggest too is sometimes as a carrier, they do not like DNS requests originating from a network that is not their own. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I'm on Comcast, once again Comcast Internet, and I have a printer that's configured with a DNS server that is provided by Comcast. Well, Comcast sees the traffic originating for DNS requests from this IP address for that printer. So the printer's trying to request DNS, and then Comcast says, you know what, this isn't my network, I'm blocking this request. So what happens is, well, essentially DNS is broken for that machine, because guess what, it's not going to answer. So the reason I bring that up is just make sure whenever you implement a cloud link or any of our solutions to remember that your new egress is going to be our data center and ingress as well. So in the case of an ISP, they sometimes don't like traffic coming from another network. So if your customer is relying on DNS servers from their ISP, that's kind of a good thing to talk about or check out before you deploy a cloud link. That way you're not running around trying to figure out why devices isn't going online, when merely all it is just a DNS adjustment. You can use a different public IP for a DNS server like Google DNS or OpenDNS or whatever it is that you might want to use. So keep that in mind. That's one of the gotchas I see from time to time. Another one is going to be, let's say the ISP is very old school, email server, and they do not like traffic talking to their email server, the client traffic talking in if it's not originating from their network. Sometimes these partners, and I've seen it happen before, they don't like all these clients all of a sudden trying to connect to their email server from a different place. They don't like this network. They're not familiar with it. It's not our network as an ISP, so guess what? We're not going to let this happen. They'll block it. So that's why it's important to notice this public IP where your traffic's going to be coming from. It's important to think about stuff like that and say, you know what, ISP, our network's going to be changing, and I'm going to be coming from this IP address. Can you please whitelist this IP? Just get that out of the way, because we've had to whitelist for some partners every now and then. Not everybody still relies on their ISPs as for their email carrier, but from time to time you'll have one or two that have that, and they may need that whitelisted. It's better to do it up front. And let me see if I have any more questions. MAC address control is not currently available. So MAC address control, I'm assuming you're referring to being able to limit MAC addresses that do not belong on the network. We don't have that right now, but that is a feature that we've been looking into. I would say that would probably be in our roadmap in the future. It's not currently in our roadmap. But yeah, no, currently MAC address control is not available in this product. Now, I know we mentioned BYOG several times. If you have a product that you like using the MAC address control and the function that it has currently, but the UTM isn't enough, that'd be a great place to combine IPsec tunnel or GRE integration with MyDigitalShield, and basically you would hand off the traffic to us. You can do MAC address control on the local network on your existing hardware. So that is how you would be able to manage that currently. How do you receive alerts from MDS for IPS DLP application control? So there's two things that you would rely on. MDS has reporting capabilities, so you would, if you notice here on the left side, I have the ability to request a report. Report request would be delivered to you very first time that you connect a cloud link. We like traffic to generate a little bit of data, so we wait a day or two and then get that report out to you, so that way you have something to look at. But our report will include information that will describe different threats that we've seen on the network. It's a 7-day report, so you run that and you see the traffic and the types of attacks that we've stopped or blocks that we've seen on the network, including all those engines, IPS, web filtering, the highest bandwidth consumers. You'd see things like that, the amount of traffic that was consumed. If you guys want to receive a sample report, I think Adam has a copy of a sample report. Adam, if you confirm that, if you don't mind.